Hello, and welcome to the Bullcast Podcast. I'm Katie Pickler, and with me today, he's back, ladies and gentlemen. We pulled him from the underworld, and he is here. Court Winsett. He's giving me the biggest eyes.
Hello. Hello, Hades.
I don't know why you came from the underworld.
Why on earth did I go to hell?
And Cameron Spann.
Where'd you pull me from?
You've been here the whole time.
I've been here the whole time.
Sorry, guys. I just had to have a little fun with this. So if you've been listening for a while, been a dedicated listener, or even just listen sporadically, you know that we are a financial podcast. We talk about all things finances and even hit some of the trendy stuff that's trending on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. But, one of the things that we always want to strike it and we want to hit in different ways is talking about savings, talking about retirement. Retirement is something that a lot of people, they talk about. It's just kind of, oh, one day I'll retire. Or some people are like, I want to retire tomorrow. There's very definite opinions on what retirement is.
Well, I mean, isn't retirement just when you're not working anymore?
Oh, boo-boo. There is so much more to retirement than that. And I wrote a paper actually about retirement and the journey to retirement and compared it to the Yellow Brick Road in A Wizard of Oz and how retirement is almost the Emerald City. And if you are familiar with the Wizard of Oz, then obviously the whole movie is, this journey getting there and, things happen. And now obviously you don't have flying monkeys and witches trying to attack you and things like that, but you have other things like job changes, job losses, family, issues, things like that happen. But it's all building up to this Emerald City. It's wonderful. It's going to be beautiful. If we can just get to Emerald City, get to retirement, we'll be golden. But what happens when they get to Emerald City? They get there, and it's not exactly what they thought it was going to be. They don't really know who's behind the curtain running the thing. They do not know all the ins and outs, and it seems beautiful and wonderful, but sometimes they peel it back a little bit and see it's not exactly what they thought it was going to be. And so, no, I'm not saying that your retirement is going to be this whole facade and you don't really know what's happening, but it is going to be chaotic. And you've built it up so much that, hey, retirement's coming. It's going to be great. But a lot of people think about the journey to retirement and then they don't think about what's next. Because retirement means, yes, you quit working, but what is it going to be? What are you going to spend your 20, 30, 40, whatever time period you have left when you're not working and you're retired? And so this episode, we're going to talk about retirement planning at every age, because while you need to think about the now, you also need to think about the future. So I did a whole big intro to then go into our list. Movies that depict characters aging or de-aging throughout the years.
Can I start the list? I feel like I was born for this first one.
Sure. I mean, I got no problem with it.
All right. I feel like the ultimate movie on de-aging would be The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
It's a great one.
It's a polarizing film. People either love it or hate it. This came out in probably 06, 07. It is directed by David Fincher, great director, starring Brad Pitt in arguably his best role yet. He really gave it his all. And it's about, I think most people know this, it's about this baby that's born, but basically he's 80 years old when he's born. He's this crinkly old little baby. And as he gets older, he actually de-ages. And at the end of the film, he's a toddler again. So it's about him and the relationship with his love interest, Cate Blanchett. And basically, they kind of meet in the middle when he is de-aging and she's aging. And it's a really, really sad story. I cry every time I see it. It's fantastical, it's whimsical, but it's still really sad because at the end, she's this very, very old, frail lady, basically being the caretaker of a toddler. And then he dies in her arms as a baby. It's really sad.
Depressing, yeah.
Yeah, it's depressing, but it's whimsical. The soundtrack is fantastic, and it's really well shot. It's shot in New Orleans, and I think that's a big reason why I like it, because I'm from Louisiana, and it really kind of hits home for me.
I just thought of the phrase from How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's a little depressing, but surprisingly upbeat.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it upbeat. It's just depressing, beautifully shot. I love it. I give it one watch a year, and Abby's like, do we have to watch it? It makes me cry. I'm like, yes.
Yes. Okay, this next one I have not seen. Boyhood.
I've seen it.
Okay, well, Cameron,
I mean,
go. Because I have not seen it.
I believe it's directed by Richard Linklater. I could be incorrect, but it's just kind of like this documentary style footage of just.
Well, apparently it was filmed over the course of 12 years.
It was, so it's actually the same actor, and so they get him, growing into.
So it's very authentic.
It's very authentic.
Well, a lot of movies do that, where it starts out with you as a kid, and then it just has you. Developing. Like I just saw Furiosa, the new Mad Max movie, and it talks about her origin from when she was a little girl all the way to the Charlize Theron character that we know. Mm-hmm. But the next one on the list.
The next one on the list is Forrest Gump, and I think we all are very familiar with that movie. And of course, it does show Forrest from his early childhood
with the braces on his legs,
run Forrest,
up through his adult life and his marriage to Jen A.
Yeah.
And so forth.
There are similarities to that in Benjamin Button. It has kind of this whimsical quality to it. Things that really wouldn't happen in real life, but he's meeting presidents. He's a ping pong champion. He goes to war, shrimp boat, all that. It's kind of
shrimp
cool.
boat.
Shrimp boat, bubble gum. All right, next on the list is The Age of Adeline, talking about de-aging. Have y'all seen this?
I haven't seen it.
It's another
you haven't
beautifully
seen
filmed.
Our girl?
Mm-mm.
It's Blake Lively.
I know.
She's our girl?
I
do like Blake Lively.
She's Blake Lively's our girl for
She's
sure.
underrated, I feel like. But it takes place, is it the 40s, 50s? She's this beautiful woman, and she gets in a car accident over a bridge and hits the water. And I think lightning strikes the water at a certain time, and this magical spell happens to where she stays the same age forever.
Yeah.
And so her love interest at the time, he meets back up with her. He's Harrison Ford in the present time.
Yeah, and he says Adeline, and she's like, oh no, that was my mother, but it really was her.
It was her. And he's like, you look so
I just got
familiar.
chill bumps talking about that because it's just, that's an iconic scene when they just no,
it's a cool movie. Yeah, I like it.
Okay, The Notebook. You start off and it's got the different frames of Noah and Allie as an older couple in this retirement community. And then you've got them younger, and it's kind of telling their story, their love story, and how it came down to trying to remind her every day. And she's the one that forgets.
The one that's sick, yeah.
Yeah, and trying to remind her every single day of their love story.
Yeah.
The next one is Up, and that we've covered this ad nauseum on this podcast, but you go through the Carl and Ellie story from when they're kids up to when they marry, and then as they grow old, and then of course it's basically the most devastating first 10 minutes of a movie ever,
especially an animated movie.
Yeah, especially an animated movie, but it is great.
It's pretty cool. It's about aging him physically, but also kind of de-aging. He becomes youthful on this adventure to Paradise Falls.
Yeah,
so it's kind of cool. Yeah. All right, next on the list would be a movie I have not seen, but I've heard of it. It is the movie Old, which was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Pretty sure. A group of senior citizens gain renewed youth and vitality through an alien encounter. Nope. Group of people on a secluded beach begin to age rapidly.
You kind of foreshadowed our next movie.
That's right. But of course, with M. Night Shyamalan, there's always creepy vibes and a twist.
Oh, always. And his daughter is now directing,
She
too.
is, yep.
Yeah. She just came out with The Watcher, I think is what it's called. Yeah. Okay, the last one on this list is Cocoon, as Cam kind of jumbled the other two together. This is a group of senior citizens gain renewed youth and vitality through an alien encounter.
And supposedly, if the meme on the interwebs is correct, supposedly Wilford Brimley was only 50 when he filmed that movie. So he was my age or something when he filmed that movie.
Wow.
Boy, he looked like an old man.
He did. That's crazy
Movie
if that's
magic.
true. It's crazy if it's true. Anyway, yeah.
Well, the Golden Girls, have you seen their ages when they filmed the Golden Girls?
Oh, yeah.
They were not that old, but they look like senior citizens.
The mother was actually the youngest.
Yes.
So it's crazy. I mean,
imagine having to go through that makeup process on a regular. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, they filmed that show for years. So at least once a week, she was having to go through the aging process where she would put on makeup every single episode.
And people just look younger these days. And I don't know if it's hairstyles or what, but like Wilford Brimley being your age when he filmed that, he looked like he was 75 years old.
Yeah, I mean, if he really was, if I'm remembering correctly, and he really was only 50 when they filmed that, then that's just insane. That's just crazy. I don't belong in a retirement.
Well, and you look at older TV shows and movies, and that was makeup that made the difference between is somebody younger or older. And nowadays it can be obviously
Now it's
AI
digital,
and digital and stuff like that. Okay, so as we said, this episode is retirement planning at every age, because this is something that I'm not telling you to, at 21 years old, immediately just start dreaming of retirement. and just be, dazed, almost like senioritis, kind of where it's just like, one day I'll get to retire.
But we do have people that come in that are younger than me now. We've got clients that are coming in as prospects or whatever, younger than me, that are saying like, oh, I'd like to retire in the next few years. And I'm like, boy, so would I.
With anything, you've got to start planning early. So yes, you do need to start thinking about what retirement looks like when you were first starting out working, so you can map out what do you need to do at each age group, essentially.
Y'all said something at the beginning. I wanted to pipe in, but I showed self-restraint. You had said something like retirement is just not working anymore, right? And you kind of push back on it. Isn't the whole thing that people are living longer these days? And so retirement comes and it's like, I still have 10, 15 years left. And so you get little jobs, not careers often, but just like little tasks to keep your mind at work.
You should, is what we talk about, because if you just go and veg on the couch, your health will deteriorate, your mind will deteriorate. And so a lot of people, it turns into they can work on their passion project. They can volunteer. They could still work per se. And we have some clients that fail retirement. They may retire from their corporate job and then end up, starting their own company or getting involved in their kids' accounts. There's different things. So retirement looks different for everybody. But some people, it's like, I just want to chill out.
Sounds nice.
It's one of those you keep dreaming of and planning for. You don't know what it's going to be till you get there. So strategic retirement planning at every age. Research finds that many Americans underestimate their life expectancy and therefore don't save enough for retirement. Oh boy, do I hear this all the time. I will do plans and I'll have somebody living till 90, 95, 100, depict different things. And I say, I do this because I want to make sure you do not outlive your money. And there are so many people, surprisingly younger people, who are like, I'm not going to live past 60. I don't want to do it. And then I've got, on the flip side, others are like, I hope I'm living to 105, 110. So it really is a different thing. But it's also those especially who tell me, oh, I'm not going to live past 60. I push back and say, but do you really want to plan that way? Because what happens if you live to 60 in one day, 60 in 2 days?
I don't want to.
What's going to happen?
I don't want to sit here and be like an armchair psychiatrist or anything, because I really genuinely don't know this to be true for a fact. But I kind of feel like when you're 20 or 30 years old, you can't fathom the idea of living another 40 or 50 years. It just seems like such a long time to be going on. But, when you hit 50, I used to joke that I was probably going to have to work until I died. And, so my retirement age was going to be around 70. And now I'm getting closer and closer to 70. And I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be the way that works out. But one of the things that I know a lot of people have heard variations on this tale, but, we talk about Social Security and how long Social Security will last and so forth. And retirement age for Social Security used to be 65 years old. Well, the average man lived in 1945 in the United States. The average male life expectancy was 63.9. So they were putting a system in place for people's retirements. Like, if you can make it that long, then
you'll get this money.
Yeah, here, you'll have this money. But
they weren't banking on you living very long.
Yeah, they were not expecting people to live very long. Now, average life expectancy now is 77. So it's increased by 14 years over the last 8 or 10 decades.
People are living longer. We have better health care. People are taking better care of themselves. People's jobs are not as physically demanding as it used to be, because people were working like coal mines. They were working industrial. They were manual labor. And when they stopped working, it's just all the ailments almost kind of like came to the front, and it's like, you're not living much longer.
Yeah.
Here's a funny yet sad anecdote. The other day I was looking up our family name, Spann, like where we came from. I ended up on Ancestry.com, which is really fun to look at. And in the 1940s, the average lifespan of a Spann was 24 years old in the 40s.
Wow.
And it said it could be due to harsh conditions, but that has to be like death of children, right? That has to be to really lower that average.
Yeah. I mean, you did lose a lot of children, like, as babies.
Yeah.
I bet that was it.
So that would certainly bring your average down.
But we're up to 75 now. So we've come a long way.
Good. So obviously this is something to, you really consider. And a lot of times when I'm doing plans for people, I talk about making decisions on how does this impact your retirement. So if somebody wants to put a pool into their backyard for their family, I say, absolutely, you can do it. Have this, enjoy your family while they're young, while they can. This may mean you have to work another year or two.
Right.
And so that's where you weigh those out. It's like, is it worth it to enjoy my family while we're here? Because also, not to be morbid, you're not promised tomorrow. And so while, yes, you need to plan for the future, you also need to enjoy the now and have that healthy balance. That's why somebody like us can help you figure that out. 20s, we're in your 20s.
Now, why do we say start saving for your retirement when you're in your 20s? Part of the reason is because clearly, as I'm sure Katie will tell you, obviously the earlier you start, the better off you'll be, the more growth you'll get from the investments that you make in your 20s. But also, there's just a very practical aspect to it. How old do you have to be, for instance, to start a 401k, Katie?
21.
21, yeah. So, I mean, you can, you may be working before you turn 21, but in terms of actually...
And you can open an account with an investment advisor, 18, or you could do one when you're younger with your parent, essentially, as the owner.
But in a very practical sense, you really can get started on actual your retirement savings plans of some sort when you're in your 20s. So
21, you can buy a beer and start a 401k. So yeah, obviously, as Court said, in your 20s, this is an advantage to start early. You can be a little bit more aggressive with your investment strategies because you have a longer time horizon. And what I mean by that is you have longer for it to be in the market, invested, because that's truly the secret. It's not timing the market of when should I get in, when should I get out. It's the time you spend in the market itself.
Right.
So if you start young, you're going to be in there longer. You're going to have an opportunity for your interest to compound. Really, what that means is just your money's going to keep building and growing and working harder for you because you are getting it in earlier. You have lack of financial obligations typically, meaning that maybe you haven't started a family yet. So you've got more ability to save more because you don't have as much of the bills or things like that. So I always tell people when they're young, have that balanced approach. Save for your retirement, but also save in a future account because those people that want to retire early, you got to have money that you can live off of until you start dipping into your retirement funds. And, there's options if your employer doesn't offer a 401k. You can do an individual retirement account. But too many people come in and say, oh, yeah, I started a job when I was in my 20s and they offered a 401k and they had a match, but I just didn't do it. No. Even if you just do a little bit, especially if they're offering a match, take advantage of that because let's play the scenario out. And you're moving into your 30s, and now you've got a family, you've got kids, and you no longer can save as much. Well, you know what? Great news. That money you already saved will still keep building and growing, even if you can't save that much more. In your 30s, this now says an urgency of starting to contribute to a retirement account.
That's us, Katie.
Reality check. It's like, whew, retirement. One day, it's going to be here.
Yeah, it's going to come around faster than you know it. And you probably have a mortgage, maybe have a spouse. Chances are, I think, probably better that you would have kids. Although, when you were saying you don't have any of that stuff in your 20s, I'm thinking back, my first kid, I was like 24 going on 25 when she was born. So in my 20s, I definitely had house, mortgage, child, so on and so forth. But yeah, these days, I think people are doing all that stuff a little bit later in life.
A little bit later, yeah.
But definitely you're probably starting to look at things like that when you're in your 30s. If that's the path of life you want to take, if you decided you do want to get married and you do want to have kids and you do want to have a mortgage, then certainly you're probably looking at that in your 30s. And so, life and retirement and all the considerations that go into the way you're living your life probably are starting to be more of a reality, for want of a better way to put it. Okay, now you're actually thinking about your career and what's your job path going to be and how long are you going to want to work and when are you going to want to retire. So it's a good time to go ahead and start saving for that retirement or to continue saving if you can, if you already started.
Yeah, and are you the only one saving? Do you have a spouse that maybe is not working or doesn't have a retirement plan? Juggling that, because there are options where you can have your own individual retirement account even if you are non-working. If there is a working spouse, you can still save in a retirement account for the non-working spouse as long as there's earned income. The other thing, and this drives me absolutely crazy, people cashing out retirement plans. So we've talked about this in length. When you leave a job, that is your money to take. And so you should take it with you. There's options where you can roll it into your next 401k plan at work if they allow it. And sometimes they don't want to commingle. You can open up your own individual retirement account and still control those funds and have it working for you. But you need to do something. You need to make sure you remember to take care of it.
Right.
Some people, and I'll ask them like, oh, you're on this new job. Where's your other 401k? Oh, well, I just cashed it out and paid the taxes on it and put a pool in.
Yikes.
Yeah.
They're not thinking way down the line.
They're thinking of the now, and they're not thinking of their future. They are robbing their future selves.
Yeah.
And so,
everything is growing tax-free, right? But before the age of 59 and a half, if you cash it out, you're not just paying the taxes on that early withdrawal. You are also paying penalties for that early withdrawal. So it's important to understand that if you're talking about an actual qualified retirement plan of any kind, then there are probably going to be some restrictions to when you can pull that money back out. So it's more of a permanent investment. It's not something that you really want to, you want to use money that you can set aside and just leave it. Just leave it for a while.
Are the taxes and penalties brutal for pulling out early? Yeah. I'm just curious. Like they're pretty steep.
They're steep enough that it acts as a deterrent.
Good.
It should be a huge deterrent. And a lot of times, what happens is this is people that they leave a job and they've only got a couple $1,000s or a couple $100s or something like that, and so they're like, oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal, but they're hit with a penalty.
And a lot of time, what we talk to people about also is in your 30s. Or your 40s, even whatever, the longer you've been in the workforce, chances are the higher tax bracket you might be in.
Absolutely.
And so if you're withdrawing and paying taxes at a rate and you're in a higher tax bracket, then obviously that's sort of disadvantageous for you.
Yeah.
Say you've got this money coming to you and you've got a couple $1,000s. Then you're going to hit with the 10% penalty. Then you're going to hit with the income tax. Is that really all worth it for you to then go and use it to purchase something for your family versus just letting that money stay, build and grow, and you work with somebody to figure out another plan to still get what you want? I'm not saying don't get a pool or don't do this or that, but just think about it for a second. A lot of things with retirement accounts, there's specific rules of when you get possession of it and then having to get it back in there and all kinds of ins and outs, some exceptions, things like that. But let's move on to our 40s.
Okay. You're 40 now.
I'm 40. No, I'm not yet.
I waved my hand. You're now 40.
Okay. So 40s, it's getting real. We need to balance the higher financial demands with higher income and looking at, do we need to increase retirement savings? Because in the 40s, I think is when people really start thinking about retirement truly. And they start looking at, am I in a company that I'm going to stay with? And I'm going to be moving around? What is going to happen with that?
Well, it's funny because one of the things that they talk about here that you mentioned is this idea of lifestyle inflation. Like, so as you get older and as you're earning more money, you might start spending more money. And, your lifestyle is actually expanding to meet the income that you're now earning. And before you start letting your lifestyle run away with all of that money, make sure that you're putting an appropriate amount away for savings first. And then, if you want to live a little nicer life, if you want to spend a little extra money because you're earning a little extra money, you're already doing the savings part. So then you know what cash flow you're going to have left.
And I tell people all the time, obviously do a comprehensive financial planning analysis. That's something we offer to our clients, to our prospects, no cost or obligation. It's really just your time working with us. But this gives you a roadmap of how much should you be saving to enjoy life, because I've seen both extremes. Some that have set it when they were in their 20s and never changed it. Others that have been way too aggressive and they're having to live like on ramen noodles because they're putting so much into retirement.
Yeah.
So there is a sweet spot of it. But it's like when you get a pay raise, when you get a job change, things like that, that's when you should look at increasing your savings, whether it's retirement or non-retirement, that emergency future account. Then what you're doing is you're not getting used to that new amount coming to you. You're getting used to, yes, some additional because you've worked hard, you deserve this raise, but before it even hits you, you've already adjusted your savings.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Katie. This is really tracking for me because in my 20s, like you, Court, I already had 3 kids, but I was putting an embarrassing amount towards my 401k. Because at that stage, you're not set in your career yet. Salary isn't what it is when you're a little bit older and you're focused on surviving. Once I hit 30, it became real for me. Some fellow coworkers were like, you should probably be putting a little bit more, and I did, and it's increasing and increasing. But yeah, it's funny. Every decade, it starts snowballing. It becomes more real. It's like life is speeding up.
Yeah, well,
retirement's coming.
Yes, you're absolutely right. One of the interesting things that I always struggled with, and I know we're going to cover it here, but when you're in your 30s and your 40s, especially if you started having children when you were in your 20s, then by the time you're in your 30s and nearing your 40s or in your 40s, you're dealing with children who are about to want to go away to school.
Yeah.
And so you're having to potentially prioritize your retirement savings or school savings for your kids' school, or are you going to pay for it? Are they going to pay for it? Are they going to have to take out loans? So you've got to take all of that into consideration and make sure that you're doing what's best, I guess, for you and your kids.
Which is always where I preach, advisors are not scary. Now, not everybody works with everybody. I had a situation where I'm working with a sister, and an advisor said, I'm not going to talk to somebody unless they're 10 years out from retirement. Well, I want to talk to somebody if they're in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever it is, because we want to help you have a guide. And honestly, it's that outside opinion. Because when you're in the thick of it, it's very easy to say, I'm doing the right things. But have an outside opinion, just kind of observe and see what you're doing is great, but maybe tweak this, change that. Like, let me listen to your priorities. Because as you move into your 50s and 60s, it says you're closing the gap between desired and actual savings. So this is starting to get reality. Are you going to be retiring at 55, 60, 65? Or are you somebody who's going to keep working because you enjoy what you're doing and working into your 70s? So there are things of catch-up contributions. So when you turn 50, you can start doing a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because that is something we haven't talked about yet, but there are limits of how much you can save in retirement accounts, 401ks and IRAs, Roth IRAs, all of that. There's a lot of particulars that go into it based on your income, your age, all of those aspects of it. So that's why it's good to have a conversation with your HR department, with a financial advisor, to determine what's the max you can do and what are the best vehicles for you to put your money in.
Yeah, since we were discussing 401k, a question I had, which I just Googled on the interwebs, was if you file for bankruptcy, does that affect your 401k? And it says, no, bankruptcy generally doesn't affect 401ks because they are considered exempt under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. In general, your retirement fund should be safe from creditors, whether you file Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is interesting. Yeah, I figured they would just get everything.
Well, yeah, there's some stuff they can't touch, and there are some other exceptions under the bankruptcy code of things that you get to keep, even if you're filing 7 for liquidation. There are certain things that you do get to continue to have, but not much. But yeah, retirement accounts, ERISA does help in that sense. I used to work for a bankruptcy judge, and he was very fond of pointing out that bankruptcy is a system that was put in place for the honest but unfortunate debtor, someone who has fallen on hard times and cannot pay their debts off. The rules that are in place are meant to, supposedly, the way it was devised was it is intended to help someone who has just reached a level of debt that they can no longer manage. But if you had rules in place that helped them get out of debt now, but then ruined everything for their future life, then
that wouldn't be helpful.
That wouldn't be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also looking at your investment allocations is something that we need to think about as you get older.
20s, 30s, 40s even, you're very much growth minded, right?
Yeah.
You can be more aggressive. Certainly in your 20s, you're like, oh, I got forever until I retire. So I just put this money in aggressive stuff and let's go, let's grow. But by the time you're in your 50s and 60s,
preservation is what you're thinking about, thinking about, what's going to be withdrawn, getting income from these plans potentially. Everybody is a little different with their risk level and with what they need to do. And that's why it's personalized. When you think about target date funds in 401k plans, they're based on your age and they're going to be following, just as Court said, more aggressive when you're younger. And then as you get older, it's going to be much more conservative and preservation. Now, those are good for some people. The others are not necessarily fitting into a mold of I'm going to retire at this time. This is my risk level, because those are just looking at one particular asset. It's not looking at everything else.
Right.
So that's, again, why you need to have your investments meet your personal risk level, but also your goals, your time horizon, all of that. But this is something definitely reassess. Kind of think of it as you hit these different decades, like, what do I need to be doing? Obviously, as you're going into retirement, a lot of people start thinking about, what debts do you have? What potential could come up? Do I need to be saving for long-term care? What is my Social Security going to be? This is something that if you've been married before, maybe that's something they're looking at of, were you married for 10 years? Are you able to get your previous spouse's Social Security. There's so many different things to look at with this. And one of the things I see a lot with debt is a lot of people are in a hurry to pay off their debt prior to retiring. And that's not always bad, but it sometimes can be detrimental because if you say, oh, the day I'm going to retire, I'm going to go ahead and pay off my house completely, may not be the best option. There are other options out there, like taking your retirement account and having that pay your house note for you, because then your money's able to build and grow, opportunity cost of money. Again, I'm giving very blanket information with this because it all, in Court's phrases, it depends. It's what's going to be best for you, but definitely really get knee deep. If you've never had a financial plan, please, 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 if you're in your 50s and 60s, go and get one. Take this so you have this knowledge of where do you stand and are you on track. And then now we move into the 70s. So 70s, most people are pretty much retired. There's some that are going to keep working because they love what they do. But even if you're 70, you've still got something you got to worry about. All right, obviously you have a lot to worry about, but the something that I was alluding to is RMD, or required minimum distribution. And so I'm going to let Court explain what that is, but I'm going to give you the numbers, the age to think about. Because forever it was when you turn 72. So there's two ages you need to remember. 59 and a half is when you can start getting into retirement accounts without that 10% penalty. Then it was 72 is the age that you're going to be required to take money out of these retirement accounts that are traditional, not Roth. But new policies change, things, evolve. And so, okay, you've got 72 in your brain, but wait, now that you actually may be having to deal with 73. So this year, a lot of our clients we're talking to, and they'll have to take the required distributions at 73. But, we're kind of constantly trying to keep you on your toes. So now stick with me with these numbers. If you are turning 74 by that December 31st, 2032 date, you may actually be looking at age 75 for your required minimum distribution. So it's one of those to, do some fact checking and figure out what is your age. So that's just something to think about, that you pretty much, if you're in your 70s now, then you're probably dealing with the 72. Then you're going to be close to dealing with 73. But some people that are younger, you're going to be looking at more 75. So they're kicking that back, just as Court talked about Social Security being kicked back, that age of when full retirement is. Most people nowadays at 67 is full retirement age.
Yeah. So required minimum distribution, what is that all about, right?
Yep.
As the name pretty much outright states, a required minimum distribution is basically what the government has said. You must withdraw a certain amount of your retirement account after you reach a certain age. On an annual basis, you must withdraw a certain amount from your account. And it's based on, I can't just give you a definite number because it is based on the value of your retirement account, how much is in it, and what your life expectancy is to determine how much you actually have to withdraw. But you do have to withdraw a certain amount because the government at some point does want you to make that withdrawal so they can collect some taxes on it, at least if you're withdrawing from a non-Roth IRA or 401k, that you make that withdrawal so that they can actually collect some tax revenue from those dollars that have just been sitting there growing for your entire life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so also in the 70s is readjusting your budget, because if you're not working, then you're on a fixed income. So those are things to think about. A lot of times what I see in 60s and in 70s is people are on fixed budgets. They've got this income coming in. They've got substantial assets, but they start messing up their plan by helping their children, helping their grandchildren. And so a lot of times I have to have that tough love story of, look, I know you want to help your kids. I know you want to help them get a down payment, or you want to pay for the grandkids' dance classes, or you want to do things like that. But I got to keep you in your guardrails. I got to keep you in your lines, or else are you going to tell your kids that they got to start helping if you have to go to long-term care? And so that's something as well, is definitely before you hit your 70s, you need to have thought about long-term care, things like that. And, if you want to do policies, if you want to have a slush fund that's saved up for that. But that is more the reality of people are going to end up having some kind of long-term care, nursing care, in-home, things like that they need to be planning for, versus really having to worry about, how long you're going to live. It's like, how long are you going to live and what are going to be the health needs you need? Do you have that saved? So there's nothing else after the 70s. I guess, we're not saying anything about the 80s and 90s and hundreds. And
I think after your 70s, I think we're assuming that most people by the time they hit the age 80, assuming they're still alive, again, life expectancy right now for a male in the U.S. is only 77, but that's based on average. That's not based on the full range. And clearly there are a lot of people that live way past 77. But I guess we're assuming that by the time you hit your 80s and or your 90s, you probably are actually retired. And then you're just living off of whatever funds you managed to save and Social Security. Those are your two big sources of livable money after you retire. So,
we're trying to avoid the situation of, David Pickler talks a lot about the commercials that I think McDonald's had years and years ago about coming back to work and your golden years at the golden arches. And, having this plan starting in your 20s then helps it where you can have a very full retirement. And the biggest switch for people with retirement is going from working for a paycheck to now just having a paycheck from your investment accounts. And so there's lots of different elements to think about with that. Obviously, looking in your 70s, 80s, 90s, there's different things you can do to help with taxes. For example, required minimum distributions. If you are giving to the church, giving to a charity, there's different things you can do with that of gifting some of that money to a charity. So I'm not going to get in the ins and outs of that because it's very particular. It's very particular on each year's tax rules, but also each individual. But just ask the questions. Find a partner to help you get through this so you can enjoy retirement, whether it's sitting on the beach, drinking a margarita, reading a book, or it's sitting at your grandkids' soccer games. Hopefully you understand that retirement is a lifelong journey. It is something that you always need to be thinking about no matter what life cycle you're in. And even if retirement to you is you still working, but your spouse no longer working or things like that. Everybody has a little bit different, but I would say start dreaming today about what retirement would be so you can start putting plans in place to make it happen. And yes, I just bullseyed before I bullseyed.
That's a solid bullseye.
Oh, there's the closing bell. Ladies and gentlemen, you've made it to the end of yet another episode of the Bullcast Podcast. If you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, please feel free to go to your favorite subscription service and sign up to have our podcast beamed directly to your listening device every single Thursday at noon. If you would like to find out more about Court, Katie, Cameron, or Nicole, please feel free to go to our website. That website is bullcastpodcast.com. We've got this neat little feature there where you can read all about us. And we also have a place where you can drop a comment if you want to, talk to us, give us some talk back, and or suggest a topic you'd like to hear us talk about. We do have some pictures on the site, but hey, if you're a fan of pictures, why don't you go on over to Instagram because we've got a handle there. That is at Bullcast Podcast. We also have a handle on X. That is at Bullcast Podcast as well. And Facebook, that page is Bullcast the Podcast. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as we have mentioned many a time, we do work at a place called Pickler Wealth Advisors. And if you'd like to find out even more about us, find out about what we do, what we can do for you, find out about our amazing team, and find out about our boss, David Pickler, please feel free to go to that website. That website is picklerwealthadvisors.com.
That's advisors with an O.
Not an E.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've given you everything you need to go forth and start saving for retirement. So for now, I'm Court.
I'm Katie.
I'm Cam.
And we're done.